I'm joined by Stephen Kinnock, Labour MP for Aberavon, member of the Brexit Select Committee, who favours a Norway-style Brexit. Good afternoon to you.
Hello, good afternoon.
Do you mind which order these votes come in? Do you have a sense of what might favour your own option?
Well, our preferred position, I'm not sure what has been agreed now between the whips and others, but certainly as of this morning, I was pushing for and very much hoping that we would have a system based on paper-based votes. Which is, of course, unusual for Parliament. We usually walk through the division lobbies.
Yeah, I'm told that is what you will have, yeah.
Right, OK. So in the paper-based votes, I think it doesn't really matter the order because we'll go into the division lobbies then and we will just put a cross by the options that we feel comfortable with for all of this. And then those options, that will all be counted up and then announced in one fell swoop. So we won't have this kind of last plan standing nonsense where people were trying to game the system, but rather it will be kind of written ballot papers which will all get counted and announced in one go.
Do you believe there's a good reason why second referendum shouldn't actually feature in this list of votes at this point?
Yeah, I think there's some logic to that because if you're going to have a second referendum, you can't have a ballot paper which says Remain versus Remain. There has to be a leave option. And I think it's best if we find that leave option. It was going to be the part of the Prime Minister's deal, but that is now dead in the water, I think. So we've got to find a plan B. And then I think once we've found that plan B, it makes more sense for those who are campaigning for a second referendum to bring a motion to the House saying, right, we've got the plan, we've got the exit, we know what leave looks like, let's put that to the people. And then Parliament can express its opinion on that.
You make it sound so straightforward, but you know that it isn't.
Well, of course. I mean, we are in this incredibly messy situation because the Prime Minister has rewritten the British Constitution. The normal rules of the game are that the government brings a proposal to Parliament and Parliament votes on it. And if Parliament rejects it, the government has to go away and do something different. But in this extraordinary situation, the Prime Minister just doesn't get it. And she keeps trying to come back with something that has been rejected. She's rewired the Constitution. She's put the ball into Parliament's court. We have to now come up with a plan B because she's not capable of doing that.
Well, okay.
And that does complicate things.
All right.
I agree with you.
Well, let's dig down into a scenario for a moment that might emerge over the next few days. You say she won't compromise. What if there is no majority for a particular exit? What if there are two majorities for two very distinct exits, or no exit at all? Isn't the truth of Theresa May's deal, even if you don't like it, even if you think you found it wanting, isn't the truth of it that it's the only deal we have at the moment? And yes, it hasn't so far had a parliamentary majority, but that she has actually stood firm on that deal and said you can throw anything you like at this wall, but this wall is sorry to use the wall analogy, a bit Trumpian, but this because she stood firm, hasn't she, in the face of all of the rejections of that deal, of the agreement that she's got with the European Union. What if the rest of you don't come up with anything else that's got a majority?
Well, two things I'd say to that. One is, yes, I agree. She has fought valiantly for her deal, but she has failed. Plan A has failed. I don't think she will bring it back to Parliament because she knows she doesn't have the numbers. That's the
She says she's still trying to get the numbers.
Yeah, well, okay, we'll see what happens. But as of today, that's why we're in this situation with Parliament having to take control of the order paper, is because her Plan A has failed. The other thing I would say is I think tomorrow we should be locked into Parliament until the small hours of Thursday morning and vote and vote and vote until we come up with a plan that has a majority. And then we need a government that will take ownership of that will actually recognise that it's got to act in the national interest for once rather than just in narrow party political interests. Think about our communities, think about our businesses, think about the British people and do the right thing.
But there is still the possibility that you can vote and vote and vote. It's a bit like Violet Elizabeth Bott, isn't it? I'll scream and scream and scream until I make myself sick. It's like you can vote and vote and vote, and you might still not come up with a majority that you can play with together, just as Theresa May hasn't come up with the majority so people can play with her deal. We could still be in the same position at the end of all of this.
I accept that, but that's not an argument for not trying.
I agree with that. But of course you must try. However, you could try and fail, and it's beyond. And I know you don't want to, envisage that, but beyond that possibility of May failing, the rest of you failing to come up with a majority, then it's no deal, isn't it?
I mean, one of the facts that remains is that her deal is simply not good enough, because the political declaration on the future relationship is so vague and woolly. It's £39 billion of taxpayers'
Yes, but
money
by
for a leap of
Thursday,
faith.
but Stephen Kinnock, by Thursday we might find that neither is yours, neither is anybody else's.
Well, I think we have to go through the process tomorrow, and I am pushing for, as I have been for the last 2.5 years, for Common Market 2.0. It means respecting the result of the referendum, leaving the European Union, but doing so in a way that protects jobs and livelihoods and the economy. And I've always believed that there is a majority in Parliament of people who may have voted Remain, may have voted Leave, but recognise our responsibilities to respect the democratic will that was expressed on the 23rd of June 2016, but also to respect the need to protect our economy. And that's a compromise that we're putting forward. I think it's time for British politics to rediscover the lost art of compromise.
Well, the Conservative MP Crispin Blunt, former chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, as you know, he said this morning that we are closing the door. This nation is closing the door on the new global opportunities that are out there.
But what I don't understand with people like Crispin Blunt, people who campaign for Brexit, but consistently vote against the Prime Minister's deal. I mean, it's this bizarre sort of situation we've got into where the people who most love the idea of Brexit are the ones who are getting quite close to it never happening, or either being that or much softer form of Brexit than what they'd like to see. So what I would say to Crispin Blunt is you need to decide whether or not you want to leave the European Union on the terms of the Prime Minister's deal, or you need to come up with a workable plan that can deliver what you want. And so far, they have completely failed the Brexiteers on both of those counts. That's why I think we need sensible, pragmatic, bridge-building solutions for this. And it's time, I think, to stop allowing this minority of the minority, to dictate the way that Parliament operates. The Prime Minister's been doing that for far too long. She's now got to let Parliament develop a plan B.
I had a caller earlier on who asked me to put a very specific point to you when you joined us. He says MPs are incandescent at the notion that Theresa May will not heed their votes tomorrow and Thursday. But he believes you are not heeding his vote in the referendum.
Well, I have said right from the beginning that we must leave the European Union. And the big question is how. It was a binary choice, Remain versus Leave. But Leave, you can skin that cat in many, many different ways. I have a particular vision of how we can leave the European Union, create a new pole of influence with countries in the European Economic Area, keep that strong, productive trading relationship, but come out of the politics, out of the ever closer union. But it is Leave. We're out of the European Court of Justice, no common agricultural policy, no common fisheries policy, the ability to veto EU law. There's no
freedom of movement.
EU law. Freedom of movement, there are safeguards. It's certainly not a where you can just pull up the drawbridge and change the system completely. But you have two very important articles in the EEA agreement, 112 and 113, that enable a country to pull the emergency brake and to renegotiate a new approach on the movement of labour. So it's a compromise.
The very thing David Cameron was trying to get when he went to try and...
Yes, indeed, and spent months and months on it, whereas if you join the EEA, it's right there in the treaty. It would be your treaty-based right to plug into it. And that's the other thing. The only option that can be delivered in the time frame that we have is this. We could rewrite the political declaration along these lines, have that done and dusted in time to leave the EU on the 22nd of May, thus ensuring that there's no European parliamentary elections. Any other option is going to take much longer than that, particularly, for example, a second referendum.
Quick thought on this. The DUP says now a 1-year extension is better than Theresa May's withdrawal plan to leave the EU. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that our plan, Common Market 2.0, could actually deliver what the DUP is looking for, which is the backstop never needs to be activated, because this is about single market alignment and a form of customs arrangement which would ensure completely frictionless trade on the Irish border. I think it would be much cleaner. We've had enough uncertainty, enough instability for British businesses up and down the country, for European and global businesses that invest in this country as well. We need to now, I think, leave the EU in good order. And I think there's a way of doing it which actually makes sure that we protect the integrity of the United Kingdom and the Good Friday Agreement.
Thank you for joining us, Stephen Kinnock, Labour MP for Aberavon, member of the Brexit Select